What is something bad you have done with no regrets? When I was 12, I ruined my uncle's wedding on purpose. And honestly, I'd do it again. My uncle Brad was getting married to this woman named Kelly, who seemed nice enough. But there was something about her that always bugged me. She'd come to family dinners and make these little comments about how messy our house was, or how my mom should cook healthier food for us kids. The worst part was how she treated my little brother, Danny. He has autism and sometimes makes these quiet humming sounds when he's happy or nervous. Kelly would always go really loud whenever he did it, like he was being rude on purpose. At my cousin's birthday party, Danny was humming while we sang happy birthday, and Kelly actually put her hand over his mouth. My mom saw it happen, but didn't say anything because she didn't want to cause drama. Dad just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. I started paying more attention after that. Kelly would accidentally bump into Danny when he was smiling, or she'd move his comfort blanket when he wasn't looking. She'd whisper to other family members about how special needs kids shouldn't be at adult events, when she thought nobody was listening. The week before the wedding, we went to the rehearsal dinner. Danny brought his favorite toy car, this little red Honda he carried everywhere. Kelly saw him playing with it during dinner and told him he was too old for baby toys, and that it was embarrassing. Uncle Brad. She took the car and put it in her purse. Danny started crying. That quiet kind of crying he does when he's overwhelmed. Mom asked Kelly to give it back and Kelly said she'd return it when he learned to act appropriately. That's when I decided Kelly needed to learn a lesson. The wedding was at this fancy country club. I wore my nicest dress and acted like the perfect niece all morning. I even helped Kelly with her veil and told her she looked beautiful. She actually seemed to warm up to me. During the ceremony, I sat in the front row with the rest of the family. Everything was going perfectly until the priest asked if anyone had objections. I stood up. I do. I said loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole place went dead silent. Kelly's face turned white. Uncle Brad looked like he was going to throw up. Kelly stole my little brother's toy car and won't give it back because she thinks kids with autism are embarrassing. I announced to the entire wedding. Then I pulled out my phone and played a recording I'd made at the rehearsal dinner. Kelly's voice came through crystal clear. Special needs kids shouldn't be at adult events. It's not fair to make everyone else uncomfortable. You could hear people in the audience gasp. Kelly started crying, but not the pretty kind of crying brides do in movies. She was ugly, sobbing, makeup running down her face. Uncle Brad turned to look at her, then at Danny, who was sitting there clutching his blanket and looking confused about why everyone was staring. Is that true? Uncle Brad asked Kelly. She tried to deny it, but I had more recordings on my phone. Comments about how Danny was weird and how our family enabled his behavior. How she planned to limit his visits once she and Brad were married. The wedding fell apart after that. Half the guests left. Kelly's parents started yelling at our parents. Uncle Brad called off the ceremony right there at the altar. Kelly screamed at me that I was a jealous little brat who ruined the most important day of her life. She threw her bouquet at my head before storming out. My parents were furious with me for weeks. They grounded me for 2 months and made me write apology letters to Kelly's entire family. But they couldn't take back what everyone had heard. Uncle Brad broke up with Kelly a week later. He came over to our house and gave Danny back his red car, plus a whole bag of new Hot Wheels. He apologized for not standing up for him sooner. After that, things with Uncle Brad got better. He started visiting Danny more often, bringing him little gifts and taking him to the park. He even started being more vocal about standing up for my brother in family settings. I think seeing Kelly's behavior exposed so publicly made him realize he had been too passive for too long. And honestly, I didn't regret a single second of what I did. At 12, I knew it was wrong to interrupt a wedding, but it felt so right. Protecting Danny was more important than etiquette, more important than anyone's feelings about a wedding, more important than being a good girl or whatever adults always said. It felt like justice. Mom eventually forgave me enough to stop grounding me, though I still had to do extra chores for a few more weeks as a form of reparations. Dad eventually admitted privately that he was proud I stood up for Danny, even if he didn't say it publicly. After the wedding disaster, family gatherings were different. No one dared treat Danny like he was an inconvenience anymore. Cousins who had been awkward or unsure around him suddenly relaxed, knowing that anyone who tried to make fun or criticize would be called out immediately. I noticed Kelly's absence in every event. She didn't come to the next few family dinners, birthday parties, or holiday gatherings. Everyone avoided her. Uncle Brad tried to keep it civil, but he also didn't want to deal with the drama again. Danny, on the other hand, started opening up more. I think he felt safe knowing someone had his back, that even when adults were unfair or cruel, I was willing to intervene. At school, the story got around a bit. A few kids teased me for being the girl who ruined a wedding, but it was always said with a mix of awe and fear. Some teachers even congratulated me quietly for having the courage to stand up for someone, which made me feel validated in a weird way. Over the years, Danny and I developed this unspoken code. Whenever he's anxious or someone is being mean, he looks at me, and I know what he wants without him saying a word. I learned that standing up for someone isn't always popular. It's not always neat or easy. Sometimes it's messy, loud, and everyone yells at you, but it's worth it. I never regretted embarrassing Kelly. She deserved every second of humiliation for the way she treated him. People who genuinely care about children, about their feelings, about justice, don't stay silent when someone is being cruel. I don't think Uncle Brad ever fully realized how much of a wake-up call that wedding disaster was for him. He started defending Danny more actively, making sure he got the attention and care he deserved, and even apologized to Mom for letting Kelly's behavior slide so many times before. A few years later, Uncle Brad got married again, and this time the bride was genuinely kind and understanding. She was careful with Danny, patient and genuinely welcoming. I helped with the wedding preparations again, but I didn't feel the need to sabotage anything. The difference was clear. She didn't deserve it. That wedding went off without a hitch, and for the first time, everyone including Danny enjoyed the event. I watched Danny dance around with his new Hot Wheels car, smiling uncontrollably, and I realized that my actions at Kelly's wedding had ripple effects. It wasn't just about exposing a cruel woman. It was about teaching my family that protecting each other matters more than social niceties. As for Kelly, she tried to contact Uncle Brad a couple of times after the breakup, but he blocked her number. Every so often, I'd hear rumors through family grapevines about her being upset or angry, but she never appeared at any family event again. Her absence became a blessing. Danny and I could just be kids again, without the shadow of someone who didn't respect him. When I look back, I remember the tension before the wedding, the anxiety as I waited for the right moment to speak, and the exact second I pressed play on the recordings. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and empowering all at once. I have learned a lesson about courage, about standing up for what's right, about the fact that sometimes, doing the wrong thing in someone's eyes is actually the right thing in the eyes of justice. Over the years, I've used that same principle countless times, small instances where someone was being treated unfairly, where I could intervene and make a difference. I've learned to weigh the consequences, but I never let fear stop me from doing what I knew was right. Even as an adult, I think about that wedding often. It reminds me that sometimes, being a kid doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes it means being brave enough to speak up, even when everyone else expects you to sit down and stay quiet. Danny and I joke about it now. We call it the Great Wedding Heist of 2012, and we laugh until our stomachs hurt. Every so often, when family gatherings get tense or a new cousin is being annoying, I whisper, "Remember the wedding?" and he nods. We share a look, knowing exactly what that means. That one event shaped how we navigate life and family. It's a memory, a story, and a reminder, fighting for what's right is always worth it, even if the world thinks you're causing chaos. And honestly, if I had the chance, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Story to what happens when the home you fought to protect turns out to be the very place that breaks you? My name is Ethan Cole, age 34. Navy SEAL for most of my adult life until an IED in Kandahar shattered my shoulder and narrowly missed my lungs. They told me I'd come home a hero. No one told me I wouldn't be welcomed home at all. Easter Sunday had always been sacred in our family. Crisp shirts, church in the morning, deviled eggs, and glazed ham in the afternoon. My mother, Angela, used to braid my hair before service and whisper, "God sees even when others don't." This year, I didn't argue when my father summoned me to dinner. Even injured, I wanted to believe some part of home still existed, a place where love lived alongside sacrifice, but I should have known better. My father sat at the head of the table, chin jutted forward, knuckles white around his fork, a Marine veteran, decorated and self-made. The kind of man who thought giving affection was a weakness and receiving it was a failure. His new wife, Patricia, was perched beside him like a porcelain figure, perfect hair, cold gaze. My younger brother Kevin was there too, starched shirt tied just right. He'd come back from Yale to join the family business. Everyone stared as I lowered myself into a chair slowly because of the injury. Not one word of welcome, not one offer of help. Finally, Dad spoke. He didn't look at me, just at the air above my head. "We prayed for you," he said flatly. "Look what it got us." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He set down his fork with a metallic clang. "It means I sent a boy to become a man, and got back someone who can't even finish what he started." My jaw clenched. "Dad, I was discharged because I lost nearly half my lung." He slammed his fist on the table. I didn't raise a quitter, and there it was, a single sentence that carried 30 years of silence, resentment, and buried cruelty. Patricia chimed in quietly like poison dipped in sugar. "Some families just can't recover from fragility. especially after such weak maternal influence. Kevin shot her a warning look. But she'd said enough, Dad stood. Where are you watching from? Comment your city. I love seeing this community grow. You're a disgrace, a burden, you should have died over there instead. You come dragging yourself back home looking for what? Mercy. The room spun. I swallowed hard. Everything I made, every dollar I earned over 8 years, you got it. I sent it home. For you, for her, for this house. Dad leaned down, face red with fury. She wouldn't have needed that money if she had stayed strong. She gave up and so did you. The words landed like bullets. But the wound wasn't just from him. It was from knowing I'd given everything I had. And it was still never enough. I stood, the room blurred at the edges. My mother's old silver locket was still in my pocket, a memory I carried. Even when nothing else was left, I placed my napkin gently on the table. No yelling, no scenes. Goodbye, I said, barely above a whisper. I hope someday you find someone worth loving. I gathered my duffel and walked out into the cold evening. The sounds of forks and plates echoing behind me like I was never there at all. I didn't look back. I stepped into the night and toward the bus station, wrapped in silence, carrying a broken shoulder, a duffel full of nothing, and a heart full of things I'd tried to long to hide. As the bus pulled away from the town where I'd been nothing but a shadow, I pulled out Mom's locket. Inside was a tiny dried lavender flower, her favorite. She'd once told me lavender never dies. It just changes form, remember that, Ethan. I clutched it gently. It was time to find the place where life didn't ask me to prove my worth, where someone might still recognize who I was beyond the uniform, beyond the scar tissue. So, I went to the last place that still felt like home, Grandma's farm. The bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving me standing in the cool pre-dawn air. The gravel under my boots crunched softly, the only sound on a quiet road 2 miles from the place I'd hardly let myself think about these last 8 years, Grandma's farm. The moon was just beginning to give way to a sleepy wash of lavender and gold, the kind of sky Mom used to call God's paintbrush. I hadn't thought about that phrase in years. Funny how memories hide until they're ready to speak again. As I walked the familiar path up to the farmhouse, limping just a little, arm stiff in its sling, I saw the old maple out front, branches draped like they were holding on to secrets. The porch light was still on, she'd been waiting. The screen door creaked before I even stepped onto the first plank. Ethan, her voice was soft, tired and kind in a way I hadn't heard in too long. I turned toward the doorway. There she stood, Margaret Cole, my mother's mother. Her hair was all silver now, pulled back in a braid. Her eyes, wrinkled at the corners, were still the same steel blue as Mom's, sharp and full of quiet knowing. I said nothing. She didn't expect me to. She stepped out and opened her arms. I leaned down slow and careful, and she pulled me into a hug that smelled like fresh bread and rosemary. And something else I hadn't felt in years. Safety. I've been watching the news, your discharge. The attack, she whispered, then she stepped back and cuped my cheek. You're home now, love? Not to be judged, but to rest. I blinked hard. I don't know how, I said. She nodded, not trying to fix that, just patting my arm. Then we'll start with quiet. We sat in the kitchen, the same one I painted with Mom when I was 12. The same one where we compared the shapes of clouds through the window. That day, Mom said the shape of mine looked like a bird. You'll fly out of here one day, she told me. But you'll always be welcome back. Grandma placed a mug of tea in front of me. Peppermint and lemon, your mother's favorite, she said. My throat tightened. I pulled something from my duffel bag, a small, framed photograph, the last one we ever took together. Mom had her arm around me. Her other hand was clutching the hem of my cap, stealing it for the picture. Grandma smiled sadly. She's been watching you, Ethan. Every mile, every mission, every time you thought no one cared. I swallowed. Dad said she was weak, that she gave up. Grandma's face hardened, a cold, quiet anger. Your father lied. She stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a box that she kept wrapped in a quilt. She set it on the table in front of me, her hands trembling a bit. She left this for you. Made me swear I'd give it to you only when you came home. Really? Came home? I paused, then opened it. Inside was a delicate silver amulet shaped like a small bird, and beneath it, wrapped in ribbon, was a leather-bound journal. Mom's handwriting? I opened to an entry in the middle. Soft, slanted letters filled the page. June 12th. He yelled again. Said I was making Ethan weak. I stopped crying where he can see. But I still cry. In the pantry, in the garden, in the car. I don't know how long I can pretend I'm okay. But Ethan, my Ethan, he still sees me, and that's the only thing keeping me alive. I closed my eyes. Even now, it felt like she was speaking to me, not from the grave, from somewhere deeper, somewhere sacred. Grandma reached out and laid her hand on mine. Your mother didn't die of heart failure, Ethan. Her voice was steady, and it shattered me. She died of heartbreak, of grief, of living with a man who punished her for her softness. My breath caught. Dad said she was weak. Grandma shook her head fiercely. Your mother was stronger than both of them, and she loved you enough to carry every storm silently, so you could leave here with hope instead of ruins. The truth washed over me like a tide. I opened the journal again, turned to the last page. If Ethan ever sees this, I want him to know something. You're not broken, you're not weak. You're everything I hoped a man could be, even if he grew from soil cracked by others' cruelty. You're my heart, and I named you after resilience. I closed the journal, tears burning hot in my eyes. What do I do now? I asked. Grandma placed a hand over my heart. You don't go back to beg forgiveness, you go back to tell the truth. The clock ticked. Morning light began to streak through the window, landing softly on the locket I now wore around my neck. For the first time since I left Afghanistan, something in me felt whole again, not healed. Not yet, but steady. It was time to show him and myself what strength really looked like. The dawn settled into a soft gold over the horizon, the kind of morning light that seemed to bless everything it touched. I sat on the edge of Grandma's field where wild mint grew in the soil, and the breeze smelled like new beginnings. It was quiet here. Not the silence I knew from the battlefield where stillness was just the breath before the next storm. This was different. This silence asked nothing, demanded nothing. For a moment I just sat. Let the stillness seep into the bruised places inside me, the places I'd never dared to feel. I reached into my pack and pulled out a notebook, leather-worn, corners curled from sand and sun. It was with me through deployments in Djibouti, Kandahar, Fallujah. Every night I wrote something, even if I tore it out the next day. I never let the silence walk alone. But I'd never written this. A letter I'd always thought about, but never sent. Not to my father, to her. Mom, I always thought that if I came back in my uniform, medals, scars and all, I'd finally be enough to earn your pride. But that's the thing, I was always enough for you. You saw me even when I didn't know who I was becoming. You didn't need me to prove anything. You just needed me to live, to love, to remember the soft things you taught me. Things Dad called weakness. But I get it now. Love isn't weakness, kindness isn't fragility. You held up a house built on pain, and you did it silently for everyone's sake. I'm sorry I left you alone with him. I'm sorry I never asked the questions that would have shown you I cared. But mostly I'm sorry I didn't understand until now. I miss you. Every day I thought the uniform would make the grief quieter, but it didn't. I never got to say goodbye, so here it is. Thank you for loving me enough to survive what you shouldn't have had to. For teaching me that even hurt hearts can still beat with grace. I'll carry your truth into the light now, not for revenge, but for release. I'll make sure he hears the truth, if only to face what he's buried so long. You didn't die because you were weak. You died from being too strong for too long in a place that didn't deserve your fire. I'm going back, Mom, not to fight, but to finally be seen. I closed the notebook, but didn't tear out the page. I stood from the grass and walked toward the house. Grandma was sitting by the kitchen window, shelling peas into a ceramic bowl. She looked up, read my face, said nothing, just nodded. It's time, she said softly. That afternoon, I packed the journal, the medical report, Mom's burial flag and a letter. Everything I needed, not to argue, but to speak. I left the locket around my neck. The sun was barely visible when I reached the road again, dusty, cracked, familiar. Before I got on the bus, Grandma pressed something into my hand, a small folded square of paper. From her, she whispered. I unfolded it. Strength isn't in silence. It's in saying what you carry out loud. I closed my eyes. Mom was gone. But this time, she wasn't silent. And I wasn't alone. As the bus pulled out toward the old church, toward the life I thought I'd left behind forever, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, something stronger, resolve. The glass doors of the church reflected the late afternoon sky, heavy clouds, slipping shades of blue and silver. I had always remembered it as a place of hymns and candles and whispered hopes. But today it felt different. Today it was a courtroom. Today I would tell the truth and let it echo in the walls that once told me to be quiet. When I reached the steps, I smoothed the edge of the burial flag peeking out of my duffel, Mom's flag, a symbol that once draped her coffin, now about to lay bare the truth of her life. People filtered in through the entrance, old pillars of the community, retired servicemen, families in pastel sweaters. Some nodded out of familiarity, others stared, whispering. I kept walking. Inside, the sanctuary was already lit with candles, old wood pews arranged in tidy rows, handwritten prayer cards tucked into songbooks. A stained glass window cast a stream of emerald and amber light across the aisle. George Whitman, the pastor, was greeting people by the doors until he saw me. His expression softened, compassionate, almost relieved. Ethan, he said quietly, squeezing my shoulder. Good to see you home. Good to see someone still remembers what home means, I replied. He nodded. If you're here to pray, you're welcome. If you're here for something else, you're still welcome. I gave him a small smile, then kept walking. Dad was already here, standing near the altar with his Marine buddies, their medals pinned to crisp suits, their backs straight, faces smug. They were laughing in church. That sound had always unsettled me, even as a kid. Dad turned, stopped laughing the moment he saw me. The room fell silent. I stood at the center aisle in my full-dress uniform, my seal insignia glinting under the candlelight, the silver locket resting against my chest. "Ethan," he said, voice booming across the sanctuary, "you came back after all." I didn't speak yet. I walked slowly up the aisle, past rows of curious faces. Then I stood in full view of the room. I opened my duffel bag calmly, deliberately. First, I placed the folded American flag down at the foot of the altar. The sanctuary held its breath. I heard a woman in the back stiffen. "That's Angela's flag." Dad's face darkened. "What are you doing?" I looked him in the eye, telling the truth. I reached back into the bag and pulled out my mother's journal, the one he never knew existed. "You said she died of a weak heart that she gave up." I opened to a page, her handwriting trembling but unbroken, and read aloud. He said, "I'm weak today. That love makes me soft." He doesn't understand. Softness is how you survive when you live with cruelty. The sanctuary rustled. I heard quiet gasps. A few hands covered mouths as neighbors and old friends listened. Really listened. For the first time, Dad tensed. "That's enough." I raised a hand, not to him, to silence him. Then I held up the medical report, the truth that had been buried for years. Cause of death, stress-induced cardiac arrest, brought on by prolonged mental trauma, untreated depression, and emotional abuse. My voice didn't shake. It rang out clear as a warning bell. She didn't die because her heart failed, she died because it broke. And you broke it. Dad stepped forward, jaw clenched, face red. "You disgraced the uniform by using it like a shield." I didn't move. "You disgraced both uniforms, the one you wore and the one you demanded I wear, by never once understanding the difference between service and control." The room was stone still. Not all pain is loud. Sometimes it echoes quietly until the world stops pretending not to hear it. For 8 years, I sent every paycheck home, I said, to save this house, to feed this family, to keep her alive. Pastor Whitman stepped closer, hands clasped in quiet grief. And she died alone because she believed silence was the price of love. I reached into the duffel one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Folded carefully the letter I'd written to Mom. But now to him. I read the last lines. "Forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. And you never even tried to be forgiven. But I won't carry the weight of your cruelty anymore. I am not your disgrace, I am the legacy she left behind. And that legacy speaks now." Then I unfolded the flag that once honored her strength, and laid it gently across the altar steps. A hush settled over the room. Dad's voice cracked, low, broken, not in anger, but something else. Something raw. "Ethan," I didn't turn. For once, he was the one left standing in silence. Instead, I walked through the rows, past the pews, past the stained glass, past the people who seemed to finally see me not as a shadow, but as a sun. Outside, the wind carried spring blossoms from the trees. Soft, quiet, free, just like she always deserved to be. The church bell tolled as I stepped outside, each peal echoing across the quiet street, rippling with something I hadn't felt in years: release. I didn't look back at the sanctuary. I'd said what I came to say. The truth had finally breathed, not whispered in the cracks, but spoken aloud where it mattered. And it didn't need me to stand guard anymore. The sky was turning gold again. That same lavender-tinged hue Mom used to bring inside the house with wildflowers. I stood for a moment, letting the wind move through me, letting the weight slide off my shoulders one breath at a time. To my surprise, someone called out behind me, "Ethan." I turned. It was Kevin. He wasn't wearing the smug smirk he always had at family gatherings. Just an undone tie, worry lines across his face, and watery eyes he couldn't quite blink away. "I didn't know," he said, voice low. "I thought she was just tired. I thought you were the one who bailed. But I see it now." I nodded, said nothing. He took another step, hands trembling. "Can you forgive me for not seeing it sooner?" I thought about that for a long moment. Then I answered him honestly. "You were raised the same way I was. We were both taught to ignore what hurt." He looked down, then up again. "But you didn't ignore it. Not today. Not like him." I placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Not in brotherhood. Not yet, but in recognition. We can do better," I said quietly. "Mom believed that." "So do I," he nodded. The start of something. A crack in a wall. The first breath in a room that hasn't felt air in years. I walked toward the edge of the church property. Toward the old oak where Mom once stood during Easter sunrise service, humming a hymn. She never remembered the words. To the hymn wasn't what mattered, just the hush it brought, the peace in her eyes. Under the branches sat a stone bench, and sitting on it, hands folded, was Grandma. She'd arrived quietly during the confrontation. She hadn't announced herself, didn't rush to fix or defend or shield, she just stood, bearing witness to truth finally spoken. She rose as I approached. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, emotion tearing at the edges of my voice. "I didn't fight him, Grandma. I just told the truth." She placed a small hand on my arm. "And that is the fight he was never prepared to lose." We sat on the cold stone for a moment in silence that wasn't empty, but full of memory. Full of everything Mom had endured and everything I'd finally shared. I pulled the silver locket from under my uniform collar, the one with the tiny dried lavender blossom inside. I opened it and held it between us. "She carried this every day," I said, "even when it broke her." Grandma smiled softly. "She wasn't broken, Ethan, she was bent. Bent under the weight of fierce love and unfair pain. But you straightened that line today." We stood, the wind lifting the locket's chain slightly, as if helping me release it from old grief. I walked toward the patch of wild grass under the tree and knelt. Carefully, reverently, I placed the locket against the earth, right where the sunlight fell through the branches like grace. "I'll leave this here," I said, "so the truth has roots and peace can grow." Grandma wrapped her arms around me from the side, her frail frame against mine, both of us steady in the quiet. "She sees you now," she whispered. Whole enough heard. Later that afternoon, I packed up what little I had and returned to Grandma's farm. I didn't stay long. Just enough to hold her hand, fix the porch swing where the wood had warped, and share one last cup of peppermint tea, and then I left. Not running, not hiding, but stepping forward. I didn't know what came next. Maybe counseling, maybe a nonprofit for veterans of broken homes, maybe just time out in the quiet, learning how to breathe again.